Welcome everybody to a brand new episode of IDTALK4ED Educators Live. I'm your host, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah, and you are here. This is the show for the unsung heroes of education. And tonight, we have a very special episode. I know I say this every time we come together, but I really mean this. This is a very special one because we're talking about all things that matter. We're making us matter today. And by us, I don't have to go any further than that. We're talking about Black and brown people because that's who I am. That's who you are out there in the audience. And that's who we need to represent tonight and going forward, especially during these times. So I have here two veteran educators, Eghosa, Obaizamomwan Hamilton and Gertrude Jenkins. They're two doctoral students at the University of San Francisco, and they came together to start a virtual high school in the midst of the COVID-19. So they're providing interim instruction during this time. And they've gone on to put together an incredible curriculum, and they're now in the process of moving things to the next level. So they're coming on to the show to talk to us about how they started making us matter and what the future lies for the high school. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Eghosa and Gertrude to the show to talk with us. Hey, ladies.
Hello.
How are we doing?
Doing good.
Doing well. Appreciate you for having us on here.
No doubt. And you all making history. This is actually the first episode where I'm interviewing more than one person at the same time. So you're making history tonight. But let's go right in. So the first question I always ask my guests is to tell us a little about yourself and just share with us how each of you came into the field of education. Who'd like to go first?
I can go.
All right, cool.
I didn't intend to get into education. I actually moved to Florida for law school and got into a situation where I had to pay the bills and make sure I could cover my tuition. So I went into teaching. I went into the night program at law school and started teaching during the school day. And then it came to a point where I really was just all into the kids. And it got to a point where my studies went from here to here. And long story short, I had to make a decision and I ended up leaving law school to teach because I had just fallen in love with my students. And I just knew it was a thing that I would be able to do, that I would be happy to be at work every day. So that's how it ended.
Oh, that's awesome. And were you trying to be a lawyer?
Yeah, I wanted to work in the family courts, so not too far away.
Okay, so I see the connection there. Yeah. And Eghosa, so what about you?
So I'm a first generation Nigerian and I grew up in Sacramento, played D1 basketball, played basketball most of my life. And I always wanted to be in education, actually, since the first time I remember was third grade, and saying I wanted to be a teacher. But if you know anything about Nigerians, teaching is not necessarily the first choice. It's engineering or the medical field or something like that. So
yep,
a lot of friends and family were just like, that is going to be financial ruin if you decide to go into teaching. So I definitely strayed away from that and tried to figure out other things that I wanted to do, especially when I went into college, just trying to figure it out. My mom passed like a month after I graduated college. And I think for me, that's when it became clear that not only did I need to teach, like teaching is like just part of who I am, but it also allowed me to like be what I didn't have in school, to be a teacher for kids like me, to be a teacher that represents what I represent and be in the classroom. And once I made that decision, like I haven't strayed away, and I know teaching is definitely something I was meant to do.
Well, awesome. And for first generation Ghanaians like myself, it's very similar. I remember telling my dad after I graduated from Temple that I wanted to be a teacher. And my family has a long line of mathematicians. So my brother's an engineer. My mom was very good at math, even though she pursued nursing. My father's an actuary by trade. So we all have the strong math background. So of course, when I told him about becoming a teacher, his first thought was, well, why don't you just become a financial person? Well, don't you do engineering? Go to engineering. You don't want to go to engineering, go to school and pursue something where you get more money.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, well, Dad, I like to be with the kids. I love the kids.
Right.
That's my passion. But it's hard for our parents, who are from that generation to really understand that because they're very old school in their ways and they believe that. Now, my mom, on the other hand, she's a bit more progressive minded. So she's a type where whatever you do, baby, I support you. You do what you got to do.
For sure.
So, yeah, so that was my mom. So, you all are doctoral students at the University of San Francisco. Tell me how the two of you met.
Everybody was like, we should definitely talk or work together. People kept saying you guys should connect. And it's because, Gertrude's going into your third year, right?
Yeah.
And I just started my first semester in the spring, but we have such similar interest in terms of looking at anti-Blackness education, focusing on Black students. And so we were in a class called Whiteness, Power, and Privilege, and that's where we first met. And it kind of went from there.
All right, well, cool. And as you all are starting to connect, you all decide, gee, kids are out of school. They need to get this learning in. And just out of the blue, Making Us Matter was born. So if you could just share with the audience, how did the idea come about? And what's the mission of Making Us Matter?
So it definitely came out of response to COVID-19, although we both separately, before we started this, felt like we wanted our own schools. Beyond that, I mean, if you've been if you've been in this country, you know that as soon as there's a moment of tragedy or a moment like we're having this pandemic, that's when those inequities are going to arise. And sure enough, that's what happened, where you had some schools who rolled out curriculum pretty steadily as soon as schools went into shutdown. But then you had schools where weeks and whole months had passed and there was such a gap in instruction. And there's which kids are those going to be? Typically Black kids. So we definitely wanted to put something in place into response to that, to kind of have a little supplement to make up for whatever students will be missing in the interim. And from there, just have a mission to do so with all Black teachers who can share ideas with other Black teachers and build curriculum together that just has our Black gaze in mind, and offer that to students, whether there's gap in their instruction or not, to just get that, because we typically have traditional school settings where everything centers on whiteness and there's very little inclusion. So it's important that we have both of those things going.
No, absolutely. And these aren't new issues. As you mentioned, they've been prevalent for a long time. Now, as far as the makeup of the school, the instructors, they're doing this on a volunteer basis. So this is all from the heart.
Yeah.
This is all from the heart. They're not getting paid to do this work. This is work that they look at as being revolutionary, and they know what the purpose is. So that's the part that I think needs to be highlighted, because we know that we don't get into education for the money. None of us did. We did it because we love it. But when you add that extra layer of the fact that we have so many Black and brown children who aren't receiving equitable learning experiences, that further pushes our mission to another level.
Yeah. And what was even more dope about that was that our teachers weren't teachers.
Right.
So these were just people who had a calling to, you know, make something out of the moment, just to be helpful and instrumental in any way they knew how. People who were making lesson plans who had never made lesson plans before. And that's been especially beautiful about all of it.
Yeah, it's
Right.
been a blessing to have the people that we have on our team working with us. And what's been dope is that when you tap into your own community, when you tap into the people around you, there's so much talent and people do and create things that, you know, not having gotten their credential. We have law students creating curriculum for constitutional law and know your rights. We have folks who studied Africana studies doing film classes. So it was really beautiful to see just tapping into our own community and like, look what we can do together and collectively.
Right. And I think that also further validates the fact that the test scores, the standardized test, and even the licensure test that we all had to take, whether it was a praxis test, wherever you are in the state. I know how to take praxis when I was in Pennsylvania. And then when I went to Massachusetts, it was another test that was pretty much the same thing, but their own name, right? And I know in Florida, they have their own test as well. But it just comes to show you that those tests don't tell the story about what you can do.
Right.
And we look at NCLB and how they pretty much talked about teachers being highly qualified by passing the test, and then yet you have the high turnover rates, primarily from those same teachers that ace those tests. So it just comes to show you it's all about the talent. It's all about sometimes just have that innate ability to teach, and we need to focus more on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's created to keep people out, to shut people out, to create blockades for the type of teachers that we need in education. And I know people will look down on, well, you need testing and you need to make sure they know the content. But I will say, both of us having been in the education field for over 12, 13 years, that we're working with that have not passed one credential, CSET, whatever test, they're killing it. They're killing it with what they're creating. They're killing it with their engagement. They're killing it with the skills that they're asking students to present and learn. So I just, you know, we need to reshift that focus.
Yeah. When I think about like just so many teachers over the years who like established relationships with kids, knew what they were doing, had a good flow, knew the communities they were working in, but because they could not pass, and it was always the math section, even if they weren't trying to be a math teacher,
Yeah.
there was always that math section that just held them back, so that they ended up taking paraprofessional positions because they couldn't get fully certified. And then after a while, you're not going to live off of that, so they had to leave. So you missed some real talent hanging on to these tests the way they do.
Right. And not to go off tangent, but there's also some things that happen depending on what district you're in, where the way they distribute waivers to certain people, for some reason, and I know it's not a coincidence, the Black folks in the districts, they don't get those waivers.
Right.
And the waivers usually last for maybe a year. Okay, you have a year to pass these tests. So it's a conditional waiver. And if you don't pass it, all right, then you lose your job. But I've seen people with waivers every single year. Same person.
Yep.
They get waivers 2, 3, 4 years in a row. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think that's how the waiver is supposed to work.
Right.
But I don't want to get into that soapbox because I want to keep the focus on what you all are doing, which is incredible. So just focusing on the offerings, the course offerings. What are some of the courses that the school's offering currently?
We have quite a variety. I can talk about kind of what we have for unit 1 and 2, and then Gertrude, you can talk about our summer sessions. For the first 2 units, we had financial literacy course, which was focused on giving students the tools to understand how to build and be stable financially and make good decisions. We had I Know My Rights, which went over constitutional law and how to apply that in your own life. We had the portrayals of Blackness in film, which was looking at how the media portrays Black bodies. We had It's Lit, which was an English class, Our Story, which was a history class with a lens of Blackness. We had Hip Hop Ed, and we had a couple pop-ups along the way that varied from art activism to DJing, creative writing, things like that. This semester, or this unit, we had Being Black and Chemically Under Attack, which is looking at environmental racism. So we had so much variety and so many talented people kind of bringing their expertise to the table.
And Gertrude, before you share the other two units, I just have to ask, when you all decided on the course names and the curriculum, was it something that was born based on the instructors who came along, or was this, and it happened organically, or was this something that you all had predetermined before the instructors came on to work with you all?
Well, we approached it based on what people wanted to teach. So, we tried to have this whole setup where we're going to have this, and this, but like, it works so much better when it's just organically and people just brought to the table the talents they had. So
I agree.
So we had the constitutional law teacher. It was a constitutional law class, but we're also thinking about, student engagement and student interest and getting at the heart of what it needs to be about. And I mean, yeah, it's constitutional law, but it's at its heart, knowing your rights. Let's make sure we understand what our rights are, especially with the precarious nature of our existence as Black people in this country and globally, but just knowing that. So we try to pick titles that kind of match exactly what we want them to be thinking, what we need them to be doing, how we want them looking at the world. For Hip Hop Ed, we are unpacking lyrics. I mean, are we listening to a song and just like going on the hook, or listening to the beat? Or are we really looking at the messages that are behind the songs that we love so well? Or giving a listen to songs that we that go over our heads. So just trying to encapsulate what the idea is for the student in the name of the class.
Wow. I wish I was in that class. I really do. Yeah, I went to a predominantly white school, so I wasn't getting any of that. None of that. And I think that's why when I went to Temple, I minored in African American studies, because I need to catch up. I need to catch up like so many of us have to, because we don't get that during our K to 12 years. We just don't. Now, right. Now, let's talk about anti-Blackness. Let's get to the heart of the conversation, because we know what's going on in our country. We see the protest. We see some of the changes, at least the aesthetic changes in our society. But I want to know, just from an educational standpoint, how does anti-Blackness manifest itself within our school systems across the nation? Now, we all have an idea of how they do, but for those who may not be as aware, if we could just break down the ways in which it presents itself. So, whoever wants to go.
I can start because there's a lot to say for this, for both of us. I think that's one of the things when we started talking and planning, we connected on, because we teach in very different school environments. I teach in a very suburban area, and she came from an area that wasn't suburban and is still teaching in an area that, I think it's mostly Latinx students now. But we had such similar experiences in school, even though the demographics were so different. And so when you look at anti-Blackness and how it seeps its way into public education, I think that was such a key moment for us to see, like, we are in totally different schools, totally different demographics, and yet this still is perpetuating itself. And I think when you say anti-Black, people like kind of freak out, like, oh my goodness, like that's crazy. But like, to simplify it, like even something simple, like your principal sending an email out and saying, hey, what are you guys doing for Black History Month? That in and of itself is anti-Black, right? It's essentially saying that we only recognize our Black students and Black history and Black importance during this month. And so the messaging is, we don't prioritize you any other time. We're not checking about your curriculum any other time. We're not looking at the books you're using any other time. But this particular month, let's make sure we pretend to be conscious of it. And that's anti-Black. And I don't think people recognize that. And I think also, talking as an educator, we're in a field that's 88% white, I want to say, something like that. So that in of itself is inherently tough for teachers of colors, and I think specifically Black teachers. The things we have to deal with, from microaggressions. You know, my first year teaching, someone sent me an email like about how well spoken I was, and I was just like, oh. You know, but I was a new teacher, so it's just like, I don't know what to say to that. Like, cool, I'm glad that you were surprised. What do you make of that? But that's like a continual, those microaggressions are continual throughout my career. And then it gets bigger when it's the only time I'm in a school where I'm one of 2 Black teachers. I was the only female Black teacher for 12 years. Now there's a second Black teacher. But we have 2 male teachers, but that's a different story. Like, that's a whole different conversation. But I was the only Black female teacher for 12 years. So this anti-Blackness also showed up as, although there's valuable things that I'm doing as an educator and bringing to the curriculum, the only time that I'm recognized or sought after is when there's a racial incident, when there's something that needs to be addressed. Hey, can you talk to the Black kids? Hey, can you come to the equity team? Can you? That is anti-Black, because my value is so much more than that. And if you're only going to see me when there's an issue, what does that say about how you see me in the other 12 years that I've been working here, 99% of my career, whatever? And so those are just 2 examples, but anti-Blackness is pervasive in public education, period.
Yes. And I was looking at a study by the Yale, I think it was the Yale Child Study Center. This was back in 2016. And they were collecting data based on preschool teachers disciplining their students. And there was one question that said, which students do preschool teachers observe more than anybody? And it stated that 42% of the time they're looking at the Black boys. 42% of the time. And I believe with the white students, it was 34%, and then the other 2 groups combined for the remaining percentage. But 42% of the time, you're looking at Black boys. Black boys. That in itself is a microaggression. I mean, whether it's that, implicit bias, like all that, because pretty much, why are you so worried about them? They doing their thing. You don't give that same attention to everybody else. Why is that? But this is the stuff that we have to bring up. These are the things that people don't see because it just goes over their head.
But it becomes part of the conditioning, and that's the issue. Like, when you are a student, you receive these messages of anti-Blackness from the moment you step into the school to the time you leave out. I remember when I worked at a school in Atlanta, it was a racially mixed school. I think it was maybe majority Black, because a lot of our kids were bused in from the south side of Atlanta, but it was in a white neighborhood. And what a sign is it to you as a Black student who has, let's say you are a Black student from the south side who has gotten up at 4 o'clock in the morning, has gotten ready for school, has taken this bus about 2 hours in Atlanta traffic just to make it to this one school. And the moment you walk in the door, you see on both sides of the hallway the top 10, and they're all white. No one looks like you, So it sets the tone already. You're not scholarly enough for having got up at 4 o'clock in the morning when the kids likely haven't had to do that. You're not scholarly enough because after you spent a whole day at school, you've done your extracurriculars, and now you've taken the RADA home, only to be awaited by homework by 10 o'clock at night, So those things aren't accepted or rewarded at all. And we get this message that I'm not enough, or the message that we always get is that we have to work twice as hard to get half of what they have. And that's always a constant message and reminder, if you're a Black student, going through school. If you dare to be in advanced classes, you'll see fewer and fewer kids who look like you. And just the traumas, I mean, we AP kids in general to death as it is, but that extra layer of what you get if you're a Black student, where you feel isolated from these classes, you feel isolated by your classmates. You got a teacher that let that shit happen, you know, who rather turn a blind eye than realize it's happening to you. And that happens all the time. And these student stories don't get told, but rather it becomes this accepted truth that that is just what it means if you're going to be Black and scholar. And it's very warped. And then you dare to go to university, that's a whole nother, you know, set of microaggressions and all types of signs of anti-Blackness and imposter syndrome. So it continues to intensify and leads to so many health issues down the line.
Oh, for sure. Go ahead.
I was going to say, to add to that too, with Black students, like we tend to minimize the worth of their knowledge and what they bring to the table, right? Because we have traditionalized, quote unquote, mainstream knowledge and what that is and what that looks like, which is inherently anti-Black as well, right? Where students who are able to show their presentation of learning in a variety of ways are deemed not smart because they're not able to write this essay in this particular way. And I think we've got to disrupt that. Like, who's created these formats that mean success? Who's created these standards that mean you're smart or intelligent? And I think that's one of the frustrating things in part of education. Obviously, our goal is to disrupt that and show that students can learn and teach them. You know, it's a difficult thing because you have to, like, here's how to be successful in this country. You got to teach them those things, right? But also you've got to acknowledge that what they're bringing to the table is valuable as is, and how can we cultivate that and grow that and empower that? So to be Black is to try to navigate all that terrain and know that you're sacrificing something to get there, right? If you're going to completely go, I'm going to assimilate to what I know is going to be successful, what do you have to sacrifice to do that? And if you're not going to assimilate, then you might be sacrificing opportunities. So it's always a difficult choice for our students.
And I want to touch on that for a second, how we evaluate intelligence. Because if we take Howard Gardner, for instance, he talks about multiple intelligence theory. He talks about the idea that there are different ways in which students express their intellect, right? But if you look at the way that intelligence is assessed within our schools, it's all based around reading and writing. But there are other ways in which we show our intelligence and our brightness, but those aren't how we evaluate our students in traditional schools. And that in itself is a problem, because now you're creating a perception that you can only be intelligent if you're able to demonstrate that by those two modes, by being able to write as well as being able to read. Some of the brightest people who look like you and I couldn't do both or one or the other, and they were able to be very successful. Mm-hmm. But you never hear about those stories. You never hear about those for obvious reasons. But this is something that people just need to be aware of, especially now during these times. It shouldn't take tragedies like what we've seen in recent times to have this conversation, because these are things that have been happening even pre-COVID. And I'm glad that it's in the forefront, but a part of me also feels frustrated, because it's like I've been telling y'all this. We've been saying this for forever. Now y'all want to listen,
right?
You know, so I'm mixed on that.
Yeah, it's tough. We have been talking about this for a long time, and I think that's why us having Black teachers and focusing on that, we create a space where we can also have these conversations and not have to be teaching anybody else. We can like grow from what we know. But yeah.
Right. And whoa, these questions are coming in. So let me flash some of these questions for y'all to see. So this is from a good friend, Class Disruption, Stephanie Edmonds. She asks, how do these issues translate to inequities between other groups, other marginalized groups? So for example, less women in STEM over representation of Asians?
Certainly, I think that in teaching not even teaching, and showing our children how to navigate through struggles. And I want to be very clear that this is a school that's welcome to all students, not just Black students. It's an all Black faculty, but we have we want students from all backgrounds. And one thing that I drive home in my pedagogy is that we're going to talk about our experiences as Black people, but we do that through understanding each other as well. So you cannot talk about Black gays if you don't talk about Black gays at all intersections, for example. Those things need to be definitely taught. When we talk about other minoritized groups, Mimi Gosa talked about like the dream is for us to successfully create a blueprint for a model where there can be independent Black schooling set up. I mean, hell, if we can get a global network just so we know where we are, but have that and then share that blueprint to other minoritized communities. And let's set up those independent schools that not only teach students, fundamental skills, but things that are also taught through a lens that is specific to their own survival. So that how wonderful would it be if there are times where, for example, we're just going to shift kids for this month. And
right.
Too much of the independent Black school and now going to the independent Asian school. Okay. Now they're over here at the indigenous school, so that we have our knowledges, we have what's important to our cultures, we have a lived experience with our struggles in this country that are all unique. But in doing so, understanding that there's this common thread amongst us. And I think that that's one of the biggest tools if we're going to fight colonialism, because I mean, we're all touched with that. And I think that goes a long way, but it is very important that we see each other's struggles through this.
No, absolutely. And it just goes on to say, just because the focus is on Black lives, that doesn't undervalue the lives of other marginalized groups.
Absolutely.
If anything, it amplifies their stories as well because of the fact that we have shared experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that people are recognizing that and not trying to alter the narrative, to create a different perception, different than what it actually is. But now with Making Us Matter, so y'all have the school, you're doing the classes free, mind you, just out of the bottom of your heart. But I'm wondering, are there plans for the school to become accredited where they're in a physical space, people can attend? So where is Making Us Matter in that process?
Go ahead.
Ultimately, the vision is to be an accredited high school where, given the way things are going, we're still going back and forth, whether that's going to be brick and mortar or if it's more successful to remain online. Mm-hmm. As we move through now, we we're going to have this summer enrichment program, and then moving into the fall, depending on what things look like, we definitely want a Saturday component. What we offer, but also we are working in conjunction with schools, because I mean, if ever there were a time for social justice curriculum, if ever there was a time for some really deep teacher, faculty, admin training through that kind of social justice lens, it's now. So we definitely want to partner with different schools and school districts and bringing that curriculum and offering that at school. So many high schools offer independent studies. Why not take a Making Us Matter course through your independent study, supplement your education, but also get the credit that you'll need for class. So that's what we're moving towards in the immediate future. But ultimately, yes, we do want it to be its own accredited school.
Awesome. And Eghosa, do you want to add anything? Or
no, that's a great start. I mean, we're definitely, if there are people out there that we're looking to move into nonprofit status as well. If there are people out there that have connections or things like that, we're definitely open and learning and growing as we go. We started this in March, and there's a lot to learn and there's a lot to do. So our ultimate goal is especially connecting with schools that are willing to give students credit for credit recovery in the same way we do with online courses now, but more substantive because they have teachers in front of them. That's where we're at.
So we're on live right now, and I know you all still need some support with different things, particularly the financial piece. Because if we're trying to make this an accredited school, we can't do it without any funds. We need some funds. So how can people support you? If not financially, maybe in the form of human resources. So what do you all need? Because we want to make sure that we support you as much as we can. So this is your chance to put a pitch out there for those who are watching so they can share with their friends and networks.
Certainly, we on our website, you can donate directly to us. That's always an option. However, resource-wise, I mean, we love this idea of sharing thoughts with one another. So if there are people who can't offer time in terms of teaching courses, if you write curriculum, if you have a flair for it, if you want to share those ideas, if there's an idea for a class that you want to bring to the forefront, please join us. Certainly as we grow, we definitely want to make sure that our students have access to books, different type of access to different software. We're definitely moving into seeing how we can make this a bit more interactive, especially if all the kids are going into the fall. And then more than anything, just keep sending us children. You know, we are only as effective as the number of children we can teach. So certainly we're looking for more kids, and I'm sure I'm leaving something out, Eghosa.
No, I think that's great. I think our big focus is more students and any educators that want to help. And that's everything, like grant writing, if you're something solid with that, if you're good with, you know, as we continue to build and have our donations, helping us organize that nonprofit stuff. So really any help in any capacity, we're looking.
So I'm on your website right now. So I just want to just kind of show people where they can go. So if you look at the upper right-hand corner, people, this is a donate button. So if you're able to donate any amount, no matter how big or how small, please let's support these sisters because they're doing something very revolutionary, and it's only going to be as strong as the number of people who support. So let's make sure we do that. And here's the enroll now button. So I think those are for people who are interested in joining the school and taking courses. They can click on this button here.
Yeah.
And I believe there's a tab for educators. So if there are any people who want to volunteer to teach a course, I know there's some information there where they can sign up. And then you have the requirements here on the tab. So you don't need a degree. You don't need to pass all the licensure tests. You just have to have the passion and have at least a high school diploma.
And I do want to shout out our web designer, Drina Harrison. She did an excellent job on our website.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is a fresh website right here, nice and clean. I need to step my game on my website. But please, people, let's make sure that we support. So they need educators, and it doesn't matter whatever skill that you can bring to the table is only going to benefit the kids you're serving. So just keep that in mind.
And just also think about, like, what were all the things when you were in school that you wish you could have had that really would have added some texture to your experience with education. If you feel like that's been missing, like, let's create it for them.
No, absolutely. And I feel like with the school that you are creating and building, it's just taking us back to the Freedom Schools movement. We're going back to that. We're bringing that back. And we're just trying to get more people to get on board. We got to get back to that. Because that's the very reason why it started. Because the way that our kids were being educated was not representative of their culture, was not representative of who they were as far as their identity. So to have this, hopefully it's a blueprint for many more programs to come in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I wanted to add too, like for people who are on their cell phones, you can text "We Matter" to 202-858-1233, and that also will send you to wherever it is.
Awesome. Well, Eghosa and Gertrude, thank you so much for being on the show. Now, for those who want to follow up with you and stay connected, what are the social media handles that they can use to stay connected with you all?
On Instagram, you can find me at teach.love_. Yeah, that's about it for me.
I'm on Instagram, your favorite damn teacher _ in between each word, and fave damn teacher on Twitter.
Right. And then for the school, it's just at Making Us Matter. Pretty simple.
Yep.
No spaces, no underscores, just at Making Us Matter. And that's all platforms, pretty much.
Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of it. Yep.
Website, makinusmatter.com.
Yep.
Awesome, awesome. So ladies, thank you so much for being on the show, and just much continued success to you all. And I just look forward to seeing how Making Us Matter grows from this point forward.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you for having us on.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate what you're doing as well. So
thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Shine a light on this. Thank you.
Yes, I know y'all out in Cali, so you have a little bit more daylight than I do. So I guess enjoy your early evening. All right, bye-bye. So there you have it, people. Another episode of IDTALK for Educators Live, and we really got deep with the anti-Blackness conversation, and it's just something that needs more time to really unpack. So we might have to do a part 2, maybe even a part 3. It's just that deep. So before I leave you all, I have a few announcements, as always. So the first thing is we have the Identity Talk for the Culture series that's going to come up next month. And this is a collaboration between my company, Identity Talk for Educators, and my friend Shauna Brown's company, Teach for the Culture. If you know any new or aspiring teachers of color who are interested in becoming teachers, please direct them to our handles at Quam_the_identity_shaper, and Shauna's is at Teach for the Culture. Be sure to follow both of us, and we're going to keep on sending updates on this event. We're looking for topic suggestions that you'd like to hear us discuss during the series. Is going to be for the month of July, happening every Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern time, y'all. So please make sure you share that with your networks and let people know. And then the other announcement is, if you're interested in being on the show, or if you know somebody who needs to be on the show to share their story, they can email me at identitytalk4educators@gmail.com. And we're not just looking for the traditional classroom educator. We're looking for activists. We're looking for people who are transforming their communities one person at a time. So just keep that in mind. If you know somebody who fits that description, please make sure they contact me at identitytalk4educators@gmail.com, and let's have that conversation. Let's put you in the spotlight. And those are my announcements for this evening. So we're going to sign off now. On behalf of Making Us Matter, this is your host, Sarfo-Mensah, signing off. And we'll see each other again in another week. So next week, no new episodes. So we'll pick it up again in the month of July. All right, then. Have a good night, everybody.